Howdy and welcome back to the Ineligibles podcast. My name is Will Stone. Chase Caldwell is still across the pond in Europe, but I am joined today by the managing editor of Good Bull Hunting, Mr. Robert Behrens. Robert, thanks for coming on.
Glad to be back, man. We're inching closer to
I
football
think you're on
season
mute,
every
Robert.
day. Oh no, you can't hear me? What about now? Hold on.
Uh, I'm not hearing it still.
What about now? Hello?
Oh, actually, you know what? I think it was me. I'm good now.
Oh no.
What the
All
hell?
right. All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, Robert.
Okay. All right.
Thanks for
We're good.
coming on.
Absolutely, man. Glad to be inching ever closer to football season every day. We're coming down the home stretch.
Yeah, there's someone on 24/7 that starts a thread every day with how many days it is. So I think it's on like 39 or 40 right now. So
Yeah,
it's
it's that
gonna
time of year where I feel like you get to media days, and like media days, there's all this news, there's all of these like sound bites and everything, and like it's almost like false fall. It's like false
right.
football season, where it's like you kind of get used to all this stuff being talked about, and then you get to this week that we're in right now, and it just goes back to like silence, and you're like, oh yeah, we're still like 6 weeks away, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, like, even when fall camp starts, there's that first couple of days where you're getting videos and things like that, and
Yeah.
Jimbo speaks to the media, and then it's just kind of boring after that. And you're like, okay, we still got 4 more weeks till the season starts, and you're just kind of twiddling your thumbs. But
Yeah, like we all get so excited to watch those first practice videos. And every year, like you get so excited about it, and then you watch it and you're like, this doesn't show me anything. It's
yeah,
guys just like doing sprints or stretching. And I don't know why we always hype it up so much, but we're all just so desperate for it to come back, I guess.
yeah. The only bright spot is I do tune into a couple of preseason games for the NFL and things like that. Just any kind of live football to uh, distract me from the real world. So the NFL picks up. I think a few teams started this week. I know the Cowboys start tomorrow, so it's really that time of year, and I'm fired up about it.
Yeah, I got to start prepping for my fantasy football draft. I'm behind this year. I need to play some catch up so I don't get raked over the coals in the draft in a few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. But you brought up media days. Nothing too noteworthy coming out last week, especially on A&M side. Kind of the same old about the play calling and things like that. So I guess if you got anything that you want to touch on there before we get into the quarterbacks.
I mean, yeah, you touched on it. The big news from the A&M perspective, which was kind of non-news, was Jimbo once again just not giving a straightforward answer on the play calling duties. And certainly from a fan perspective, we would all prefer if he would just definitively say, yes, Bobby Petrino is going to be the play caller, because then everyone would stop talking about it. But the bottom line is, no matter what he's saying, no matter how much he's beating around the bush, and he kind of alluded to it in some places, like there was a reason Bobby Petrino got hired. And not only was there a reason A&M wanted to bring Bobby Petrino in, there's a reason Bobby Petrino wanted to come here. And it wasn't to come here and not call plays.
Right.
So I think from everything I've heard, I mean, from everything we've seen from practice reports and from talking to the players, not well, I don't talk to the players, but you hear the quotes from players.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like Bobby's the guy running this show right now, and Jimbo's still going to have a hand in it. Jimbo's still an offensive guy, so he's going to be in the room and he's going to still have input. But for the people thinking that this is going to be just the same old Jimbo offense that we've seen for the past 5 years, I think that's just wrong.
Yeah. I think you're spot on with that. I know that we both shared that Chris Lowe article from ESPN. The clips in there, like the quotes in there from Jimbo, and just kind of how that relationship with Petrino has been going so far. Like he spoke very glowingly about Petrino, and I feel like I'm probably reading too much into it. I know I am, but I just feel like if it was going poorly, like he wouldn't, like he probably would have just like skirted around it and not, brought it up at all about how well it was going. And then the quote from Anais where he's like, "Hey, Jimbo brought in Petrino and said, 'Hey, here's your new OC,' and then Jimbo left the room and let Bobby take it over." So I think all those things kind of point in a good direction for A&M.
Yeah, and in that same article you referenced, Jimbo talked about, it's like, does Nick Saban call Alabama's defense? No, but
Right.
that doesn't mean he's not in that room during the week. That doesn't mean that when there's a critical moment in the game, he's not calling into that headset saying like, "Hey, we need to do this," because that's what a head coach does.
Right.
And so, I mean, you hope that like Jimbo's going to be more freed up to make those kind of decisions because he's not sitting there with his 5-star notebook of laminated sheets like he
Yeah.
had the past
His
2 years.
Cheesecake Factory menu.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's like, I mean, granted, it's late July, so like this is the time of year where everything's normally going pretty well. It's really not until the season kicks off that if you're going to see problems crop up,
Sure.
that's when it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, but at least for right now, there's no reason to think that this isn't going to be not only a different offense than what we've seen, hopefully a much more effective offense than what we've seen the past couple of years.
Yeah. I think the whole dynamic makes A&M one of, if not the most intriguing teams in 2023. I mean, I wish there was like a Hard Knocks or some kind of documentary style behind the scenes thing going on at A&M this year, because it'd be so cool to see all those conversations and things like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, oh, and especially for me, like I just really want to know not only what things are like this year, but like how are they this year compared to what we saw or what went on a year ago?
Yeah.
Because I mean, we know for a fact that there were some definite like locker room problems last year. Whether or not it was just a handful of guys or if it was more widespread, we don't really know. But yeah, it's like you just really want to know how different is that vibe from last year to this year, and how much of that growth is this team going to see as a result of that? Because that's one thing that I've touched on. I need to write an article about it. I keep meaning to, and I keep putting it off. But it's that like if we do see a big bounce back from this team, say they win 9-10 regular season games,
Yeah.
like it's not like in spite of what happened last year. It's because of what happened last year. Because I think you had a lot of guys who, whether it was that freshman class or otherwise, I think maybe thought that they could just skate by on talent and just show up and be successful.
Yeah.
And last season showed everybody beyond a shadow of a doubt that no, that's not going to happen. Like if you want to win, you need to put in the time, the effort, the blood, sweat, and tears. So if they are able to do something special this year, I think we can look back at 2022 and say, as much as that sucked, that was kind of the building blocks for maybe what this team is building toward.
Yeah, I think so. So like the offense itself is, like is an interesting topic and subplot, but also just the overall culture. And like in our state of the program episode a couple weeks back, like we were at like a 6 or 6, 7, 7.5 in that kind of range. And something that's giving me a little more hope, and it won't affect us this year, is how well A&M is doing on the recruiting front. Because after a 5-7 season, and like last year's class was solid. There were some good players in there, but definitely not in the top 5 range. They've been killing it this year, and Jimbo mentioned that in his press conference at media days, that like he made the comment that our players are our best recruiters, and I think that probably plays a factor with the culture being stronger. When those recruits come visit, it's not just a crap show, and everything's like the players are a lot more bought in. At least that's kind of what I take away from that.
Oh yeah. Well, and if you rewind to 12 months ago, sitting here in late July, I mean, we were at like, I think we had like 6 or 7 commits or something. We had just had like a radio silent summer. And even
Yeah.
before fall camp started, I get kind of felt like you're like, what's going on? Because we were coming off of, that number one, like greatest class of all time.
Yeah.
And then it just felt like recruiting had just taken a nosedive and kind of none of us knew why. And then it felt like that just bled into the season. That it was kind of one mirrored the other.
Right.
And so obviously we made some changes on the coaching staff. They made some changes on the recruiting staff too.
They did. Yep.
They let go their director of player development back in early June. Which, I mean, I'm not saying it's the cause of it, but like A&M recruiting has been on a rocket ship ever since that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say that that's the cause, but certainly, they're certainly not missing not having anyone in that role this summer because,
Right.
like you said, recruiting's done quite well. They've gotten Cam Coleman as their kind of first 5-star in the group. They're hoping to get a few more, maybe even as soon as this weekend.
Right.
It's a top 10 class, and it has a chance to end up being a top 5 class if they can pull off some of these recruits.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And we don't get too far into the weeds on the ins and outs of recruiting, but
Yeah.
like A&M has kind of made this last weekend of July this annual pool party that they have. It's becoming like one of the premier recruiting events, not just for A&M but kind of around the country. And like you see other schools. I mean, maybe this is the reason, maybe it's not, but LSU and Texas are having theirs on Thursday and Friday respectively, and A&M is on Saturday because if you follow recruiting that very closely, you've probably seen a few lists out there that it's just a loaded, absolutely loaded list of recruits that are coming in to A&M on Saturday, both in 2024 and 2025. So it's very, very impressive what Jimbo and the staff have been able to do.
Yeah, for sure. And this is third year in a row where this event is going on, where it's an absolutely loaded visitor list. And just like the past couple of years, you hope that that can lead to some commits, either this weekend itself or even just guys that kind of this weekend gets the ball rolling for whenever they do make that commitment later on, closer to signing day. I think, but this year, just like last year, the biggest thing is going to be, like this weekend could be great. You can knock it out of the park, but you got to win some games this fall.
Yeah.
Because like if A&M goes 6-6 or 7-5 this year, not only are we not getting a whole bunch of the guys we're still recruiting, we might not hang on to the guys we have.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's absolutely like it's a make or break year on so many levels for this team.
Yeah, no, it's so pivotal, and it goes back to like that culture and that offense. But in terms of position, this is a position preview, series that we're doing, and we're trying to hit quarterbacks in all skill positions on offense. We talked O-line and D-line with Jay Arnold last week. But let's start with quarterback. Jimbo has maintained that this is a open competition. I think 90% of the fans probably expect Connor to start. Is that where you're at, or do you think that there's still some fighting left to be done in that battle?
I mean, I've spent the entire offseason just assuming it was going to be Wegman.
Yeah, same.
So the fact that we're here it's a little bit surprising that he isn't just named the starter to me. But that said, that's kind of been Jimbo's MO. I think, the only other time that he hasn't had a QB battle was, I think, with Kellen Mond in 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
So I kind of don't have a good read on it because, we had the situation last season where we went into fall camp and it was a quote unquote QB competition between Haynes King and Zach Calzada. But we pretty much, no, I'm sorry, Calzada wasn't here last year, was he? He had already transferred out.
Yeah, it was King and Max Johnson.
It was Haynes and Max Johnson.
And Connor, really. But
yeah. But it was kind of a competition in name only because we all knew it was going to be Haynes King, and then and we were right, at least for a couple of weeks. But I mean, it's like it just feels like I forget who it was that said it, but they phrased it very well that Max Johnson is a QB that you can win games with. Connor Wegman is a QB who can win you games.
Yeah.
Like Max is like he's rock solid. He'll make the plays he needs to make. But Wegman he's that 5-star recruit that has that it factor that could potentially, if he plays the way he's capable of, I think the sky's the limit. So definitely the higher ceiling guy and the younger guy. So it's inevitable that he's going to be the one that all of us want to see play. But you also hope that, he's a 5-star player in year 2, that if he's developing the way that he should, this is the time where he should be taking that starting role.
Yeah. I think it would be very, very surprising to me if week 1 it's not Connor Wegman going out there and leading the offense. I like Max. I love him as a backup quarterback. We've seen the past year, like last year we needed 3. And if Like at one point last year, our backup was, I guess the last 2 years we've gotten down to a walk on being the next guy up if it had come to that. So I think they're in a good spot overall, like some of the other guys they have on the roster at quarterback. But those top two, I mean, I've been a big fan of Connor like ever since his recruitment. 5-star kid, all the talent in the world. And showed the flashes last year, and I think he's continued to do that. But I think it kind of has to be him. Like if he doesn't have it together and loses this competition, I'm going to get pretty worried about that because I don't think it'll be. I know, offense to Max, but it won't feel like Max went out and won it. It'll feel like Connor lost it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think just across the fan base, if we get to like 10 days before the first game and Max Johnson is named the starting quarterback, I think you just like everyone's optimism kind of just goes off the cliff.
Yep.
I mean, just because I think it limits what you can do, and it just and all of the like optimism everyone's been talking themselves into all offseason is kind of contingent upon having some much improved quarterback play. And like you, like I love Max, I love having him as a backup and as insurance policy, but I think he kind of is what he is,
Yeah.
and we know what he is, and we're kind of hoping you're hoping for that potential that Wegman is going to bring.
Yeah. So as far as Connor goes, it's year 2 in the system. I guess it's the first. I guess maybe I guess maybe the first full year he's been without baseball, because he did come in spring of last year and didn't and went football only. But I think that it kind of bodes well for his growth, to be focused on one sport and and be healthy through all spring practice and all that. But is there any kind of negative part about his game? I mean, like he wasn't perfect last year by any means, but he faced a lot of pressure. I thought he did pretty well not turning the football over. Is there anything that you're kind of like skeptical about or just want to see more of?
Um, I'll kind of talk about some stuff, and it's not things that I'm concerned about personally, but it's just if you're looking for the critiques on him that are out there. I've heard people say like they don't think he has a great deep ball, just as far as just arm strength. Like they don't, he's not a guy that can throw the ball like 70 yards.
Right.
And there's a lot of the like stat guys out there want to talk about that even though he didn't throw interceptions, that he throws a lot of interceptable passes. If you want to like dive into like the more deep analytics of it. But at the same time, like I think part of that is just, he came in last year and like he's a guy who like he's trying to make plays, and he saw Evan Stewart and Mush Muhammad out wide, and I think he did have a lot of balls where he would kind of throw it up and say like, I'm going to trust that my guy is better than the guy guarding him.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
I mean, and he was right. He didn't throw any interceptions. And so that's kind of the analytics versus like eyeball test, where
Right.
you can like look at all these analytics and like in advanced stats and stuff like that, but you're like, yeah, but like, did you watch the game? Because because if you watch him play, like the guys can have all the arm talent and everything in the world, but it's like quarterbacks have to be able to like sit in the pocket and find the right guy and make the right throw when they need to. And he seemed to like come in immediately. He immediately gave energy to the offense when he came in, and he made things that the other quarterbacks made look very difficult suddenly look way easier. Like the offense just seemed to function better when he came in the game.
Yeah. I think you're spot on with that. I actually saw those same analytics tweets that you're talking about. I actually quoted one as a positive, and then I went back and saw that guy's previous tweets, and he was kind of talking. He was kind of I guess he was criticizing Connor a little bit. I guess like the part that I quoted was what you just talked about. Like he's not afraid to let his receivers make a play on the ball, and when you've got guys like Evan and Musa Muhammad and even Noah Thomas with his 6'6" frame, I mean, why not put the ball up there and let your guy make a play? I mean, it's kind of like I loved Kellen. I loved the way he played, and like if a guy was open, then Kellen was going to put it on the money. but I feel like he was a little bit shy sometimes to really like just let it hang and let your guy go make a play. Uh, Connor is not like that at all. He's not afraid to just throw it out there and see what they can do. But uh, that guy's previous tweets, and his name is Clark Brooks, I believe, SEC Stat
Yeah.
Cat on Twitter. But he was saying, per his analytics, that Connor Wigman is one of the least accurate quarterbacks in the SEC, and I'm sure he's got the numbers to back that up. But whenever I watch Connor, like in the games last year in the spring game or whatever, I've got no issues with his accuracy at all. I mean, I feel like he's not just like throwing balls just way off target and things like that. I mean, I'm not sure if it's maybe if it's balls that he had to throw away. Like he was under quite a bit of pressure sometimes and things like that. But I'm not sure like how the metric is calculated. But in my mind, like just watching Connor play, there's no issues for me as far as accuracy goes.
Yeah, and it's also one of those where he only played 4 games essentially.
Yeah.
And half of those were, one was Auburn, when he was just coming back from being out with the flu the week before, and that entire Auburn game was just awful to watch, like on both sides.
Yeah.
Obviously, Auburn ended up winning the game, but I don't think either side came away from that loving the way they played.
No.
Like A&M looked terrible, Auburn looked terrible, and then you had the UMass game where it was like 40 degrees and driving rain the entire game. So it's not exactly conducive to elite offensive numbers. That game had other issues too, but
Yeah.
weather certainly didn't do him any favors. So like when you have 2 games where you did not play well, to your first 3 games as a true freshman starter, that's really going to skew your data. So I'll be interested to see like what those numbers look like this year, hopefully with a full season's worth of games, and if that is drastically different.
Yeah, and I feel like that Auburn game really, really skews the data because he attempted a lot of passes and had a very poor completion percentage, of like 30-something%. I know that cherry picking is bad or whatever, but if you just look at Ole Miss and LSU, it's like 61% or 62%. So, I feel like that Auburn game is probably an outlier. Like you said, just off the flu. I was at that game. The weather was not great. It was very cold and quite windy. Left at halftime. Sorry, you can call me 2%er. It was the ugliest game I'd ever seen in my life. So we hit the bar at halftime. But also in that game, no A-Chain, no Moose, obviously no Anias, no Donovan Green, and then Max Wright gets hurt in the first half. And like,
I forgot about that.
Yeah, same. I went back and watched it today because I guess I'm a glutton for punishment because it was so bad. I forced myself to watch it again just to get some insight. But so I think I don't think I think that's an outlier. Pretty much. I think with all the changes in offense, fingers crossed, better play on the offensive line. That's a whole separate issue there. But I really do. I like where the offensive skill is at right now in terms of quarterback and running backs, receivers, and all that. But it's probably the best I've felt about quarterback in a long time at A&M.
Yeah. Oh, and you talk about, we talked a ton about Connor and Max Johnson, but maybe the most important thing is, well, not the most important thing, but another important aspect is they actually do have 2 more scholarship quarterbacks behind those guys now, in that you've got Marcel Reed, who's a true freshman that we flipped from Ole Miss just before signing day last year, and then Jalen Henderson, who was actually a transfer from Fresno State. I know Henderson's definitely more of a dual threat guy. I don't know if that for sure about Marcel Reed or not. But I mean, just the fact that, like you said, we've had the past 2 years where we have been dangerously close to having to play walk-on Blake Boast.
Yeah.
So it's nice to actually have 4 scholarship QBs on the roster. So you hope that you're out of the woods as far as having to throw on your walk-on QB out in SEC play.
Yeah, and 3 of those 4, have college experience. I think Henderson's maybe a redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore, but even if it came down to it, your third guy's not a true freshman. So I feel like it's been a long time since we've been in that kind of position as far as depth goes. I think Jalen Henderson. I feel like that was Petrino going out and saying, "Hey, we could really use some more depth. I'm going to go try to find a guy in the portal that's okay being a backup." And he went and found a guy he liked. Marcel Reed, I always liked him as a recruit. I know we had Holstein committed. I think we offered both those guys around the same time, and then took Holstein, had him for a bit. He ended up flipping to Alabama. But to come back in and flip Reed from Ole Miss, that's a big win. Conference rival. There's no love lost between Lane and Jimbo, so I'm sure Lane was not happy about that flip at all. But I think,
but it all came out in the wash because they got Chris Marshall.
Yeah, that worked out very well for them so far. But yeah, I think it's a place where you can be critical of Jimbo. In the past, like since he's been here, not really hitting on his quarterback evaluations. It seems like Connor is going to pan out. I've got high hopes for Marcel Reed. The couple of the guys they recruited, they got two committed in the class right now. Two very different players, but both very exciting for different reasons. Anthony Maddox from Mississippi kind of reminds you of Lamar Jackson a little bit. He's got that tall, lean frame. He can really throw and really run. I think Miles O'Neill has generated a lot of buzz lately. That guy has a very special arm. Probably one of the stronger arms I've seen us recruit in a long time. I wasn't around. I think there's a guy. Is it Vance Smith? Is that right? Like back in the old A&M days, it just had a cannon for an arm.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know about if it's stronger than that guy's arm, but Calzada, Kyle Allen, Reggie had a cannon, but this kid Miles O'Neill, man, he can really sling it.
Yeah, well, and both guys who, when they committed to A&M, were 3-star recruits, and almost instantly, within like a month of committing, were all of a sudden 4 stars. And people like to look at that and say, oh, that they're just getting like a bump because they committed to this big school.
Yeah.
But I mean, more than anything, it's just normally like the schools are better at this than the recruiting sites. So often the schools are identifying these guys sooner. And also, when a guy commits to a name program, which I think A&M fancies ourselves a name program. A lot of times these recruiting sites, they will go back and they'll take a second look at that tape and they'll be like, what are they seeing that we didn't see?
Right.
But yeah, and with Miles O'Neill in particular, a lot of the sites still have him pretty far down there. But I think it was On 3, they bumped him up. They have him as like the number 6 QB in the country in that class.
Yeah.
They have him as like a top 100 recruit now.
Yeah.
So, if the other sites bring him up anywhere close at that level, even, not even like that high, like, I think his stock's going to just keep rising just from a recruiting rankings perspective.
Yeah. I think I've seen that one knock on him is that he didn't play against very good competition.
Yeah.
I think he transferred high schools to one that's in a little bit bigger classification. So, his senior tape is going to be very, I think, highly anticipated by obviously for A&M, but for these recruiting services to figure out how to rank him. I've heard Bud Elliott say, that like people have asked him about, like, do you bump a guy up if Alabama offers him and things like that? And he was like, we don't only look at that, but it'd be foolish to not listen to the market. And if the market is saying, Nick Saban is saying, hey, this is a kid that we really like, then maybe we should go take a second look at him.
Yeah. I mean, A&M has a linebacker recruit right now, Tristan Jernigan, who, A&M, once again, they were like kind of early in on him. He just got an Alabama offer this past week. So I wouldn't be surprised, for that very thing that like these sites be like, okay, like if Nick Saban's saying yes, like maybe we need to take another look.
Right.
And part of that, people always say like, oh, well, why these guys having these like huge rating jumps when it's June and July and we haven't played any games since November, December. And it's like, it's the camp circuit more than anything, because you touched on Miles O'Neill. He's played his high school career thus far at a small school where he's probably not getting a lot of interest and he doesn't have a lot of comparable competition. And so the camps are where a lot of these guys, like people, be it scouts or coaches, whoever, they see them for the first time. Not only are they seeing them in person, but they're seeing them against like a comparable peer group. So
Yeah.
instead of it just like this guy's lighting it up, but he's doing it against ninth graders, it's this guy is like he's still lighting it up, and he's against like other guys that we are thinking of offering.
Yeah.
So that's why you see these, like you can see these huge rating jumps, or you see guys start getting a slew of offers in May and June, and it's because they're finally getting to see these guys on a somewhat comparable stage to what you'd be seeing in college, even if it is just in drills and scrimmages.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think you do have to credit this staff a little bit in that regard. I think for the most part, their evaluations have been pretty solid. Like typically, if you see them take a player that maybe isn't the highest rated at the time, they usually end up getting bumped up and getting
Yeah,
more offers. And people were kind of getting on us about um, about getting a commit from Cam Coleman, that 5-star receiver from Alabama. But A&M was the first team to ever offer him, like
yep.
2 years ago. So I think this staff does a tremendous job on that front.
Yeah, well, and people did that last year with DJ Hicks, where they said they're like, oh, it's like they obviously just paid him a bunch of NIL money because why would he go there when A&M already has so many defensive linemen? And they're like, no, it's like A&M's been recruiting this kid since like eighth grade.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like he's been to campus like 20 times.
yeah,
So that is one thing. And we're getting a lot into recruiting. I know we didn't really mean to,
yeah,
but especially with NIL now, everyone assumes that like guys are just going where the biggest paycheck is. I think people are undervaluing. Uh, I mean, how much the relationships still matter in that process.
yeah,
Because yeah, some of these guys are probably getting paid. They're getting paid almost no matter where they go. Um, and so like, but they're still choosing the place where it's like they feel the most comfortable, where they either have the best fit for what they think the school's going to do with them scheme wise, or just like they have that connection with teammates or with coaches. And it's the place they want to be.
yeah. I mean, I think I feel like that's why Jimbo got so offended about Saban's comments. Is it took all of the hard work that these guys do and reduced it down to, well, you guys offer more money, and that's why you got all these players. Like there is more to it than that. It's like I always say, like to follow the money, and that's usually your answer. But it's not the whole picture, and I think that context matters of being able to build those relationships and have that kind of connection. And I think they do a great job of showing off the Aggie network. This is a super deep cut, and then we can get back to running backs. But there was a 5-star, I think a 5-star defensive end from the state of Arizona in this class that was committed to Oregon and flipped to the University of Arizona, who's not a heavy hitter in recruiting, and Oregon is. And I asked, I think it was Ari Wasserman tweeted it out, and I asked him, but some Arizona fans responded to me, and they were like, "Hey, like our staff did a great job of building relationships, and they convinced him to stay in his home state." And I think it's awesome. I mean, I'd like for every recruit, except for the Cam Coleman's of the world, to stay in their home states. If A&M could try to pick a few guys here and there, but keep those Texas kids at home.
Yeah, I mean, because that's I mean, you look at the 2024 class, like the top like 10 kids in Texas. I think right now, I think it's like 7 out of 10 are projected to go to college out of Texas. Like they're all going to Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, and then A&M and Texas are mixed in there too. But
Yeah,
it's like I would love it if we were able to lock down Texas even more than we already do.
yeah. I think Florida's got a couple too in the top 10. DJ
Yeah,
Lagway and a safety too. But um, it is fun to be excited about recruiting again, because I mean,
for sure.
like it's said all the time, but it is the lifeblood of the program. And go out, win big on the field this fall, and I think everything falls into place. But
Yeah,
in terms of running backs, hats off to Devon Achane, absolute stud warrior. Comes back from being hurt to suit up against LSU. A lot of folks wouldn't have done that. He did. Had 200 yards rushing. Goes and gets picked high in the NFL draft. Is now a member of the fastest team in football at the Miami Dolphins.
that's gonna be fun to watch.
Yeah, I was telling somebody the other day that at the Pro Bowl week they need to do like a sprint relay and see and see how fast those guys are,
Yeah.
because they would definitely just demolish the rest of the NFL in that contest. But um, it sounds weird to think that the running game will be better without A-Chain, but it's not because he's gone, but it's because I've got a lot of faith in this offense's ability to run the ball with what they're going to try to do, and I really love these backs. Like there's five guys really, and there's kind of a big three that the conversation is going to be centered around. But um, you know, as it sits today, I couldn't tell you who's going to start out of this bunch.
No, I absolutely couldn't either. And I think for the first time in several years, it might be that there's not just like an unquestioned, you know, lead back.
Yeah,
We've gotten so used to having Travion Williams or Isaiah Spiller or A-Chain be like the guy.
yeah,
Um, and that just may not be the case this year. Because, like you said, you've got Amari Daniels, you've got Le'Veon Moss, you've got true freshman Ruben Owens. I could see any of those three winning the job, or I could see it being like just a three-headed monster with all three of those guys being used, sporadically. Um, and especially even because, I talked about how in previous years, A&M has really not used a big running back rotation. It's been like one guy and kind of just that guy getting spelled very, very infrequently.
yeah.
But you've got a new OC in Bobby Petrino. You've also got a new running backs coach in Blackwell from Ole
That's
Miss.
right.
And we saw at Ole Miss last year, obviously they rotated out Judkins and Zach Evans pretty much 50-50.
Yeah,
And so it'll be interesting to see like what that rotation looks like, because it's kind of a great unknown at this point.
yeah. And the thing is, like, I think you could roll any combination of the three out there and have success. I mean,
Yeah.
they're all different in their own ways, but I think they all have the speed and explosive ability. I think they all catch the ball well and can be used in the passing game. But man, if I had to pick a guy, I'd probably pick Le'Veon Moss. Just he's really filled out since he got here. Um, I think Jimbo said he ran like a 10-4 or something in high school. Just it's rare speed for a guy that big, and this guy runs like in the limited time we've seen him, he runs really hard. Like he's a tough runner. Um, I think he'd probably be the favorite to get the most carries if I had to pick somebody. But every time I've seen Amari Daniels, he's just popped off the screen or on the field.
I was about to say the exact same thing, but like every time I noticed Amari Daniels last year, it was because it was like something great was happening, and you're like, man, it's like that's a great run. It's like, oh, crud, that's Amari Daniels. Good job, dude. So yeah, I agree 100% with what you just said. Like I would pick Moss if I had to, but yeah, I mean Daniels has done nothing but be productive when he got opportunities, and then you've got Ruben Owens who comes in as some people ranked him as the top high school running back in the country last year. So it's like, does he come in and of course, and was he here in the spring? I think he was.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Does he come in and just like overwhelm everybody and take the job from day one? It's like any of those, I think, are possible.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing this year, I know you already talked about O-line with Jay, but as far as just the running game goes, I think that's going to be the bigger key. It's not that these guys are as talented as Devon A-Chain is, but you hope that they're not getting hit 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage half the time like A-Chain was last year. Because with bringing back essentially your full offensive line from the previous year, also going into the second year of an offensive line scheme with Steve Adazio, surely you're going to see improvement on that unit, and hopefully they'll stay a little bit healthier as well. And if that can happen, I think that's the biggest key to those running backs really having a breakout year.
Yeah, I think Jay and I agree that even if none of the guys on the O-line improved at all from last year, if they just all stayed healthy for all 12 games, it'd be that alone is an improvement.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That's all. I mean, like you can hope for more than that, but if we just got that, it'd be huge. But
it's amazing how much you can look back at last year and just like, because it wasn't like you look at last year and you just point at one thing and say like, oh, like this is the reason this team went 5-7. But you look back and you're like, man, there were so many things that went wrong. Like
Yep.
it was just a litany of errors and injuries and disciplinary problems and like everything just sucked. Like that was a
Yeah.
terrible year that we all want to forget. So but
Yeah.
it gives you the hope that like you can look at that and say, look, like that was kind of worst case scenario almost across the board. And 5-7 is not great, but at the same time, they were 5-7. They were, you know, a touchdown in, five of those seven losses from going 10-2. You can't just like snap your fingers and make that happen.
Yeah.
But it's like this team, for as bad as they played and for as much went wrong last year as it often did, there were so many games they were one play away from actually pulling it out and
Yeah.
one play away from like that season looking very differently. So the point is that looking forward, this team doesn't have to take quantum leaps to all of a sudden be a very good team. It's small improvements, it's small changes that can add up to a pretty major difference in your season.
Yeah, and Chase and I touched on that a little bit in our state of the program. Like if you're gonna have that kind of bad luck, just have it all in one season. Like if
Yeah,
we're gonna have 30
the big
guys,
bath.
if we're gonna have
Yeah,
30 guys miss a game like because of the flu, like let's do it in the 5-7 year, not the trying to make a championship year. So
yeah, yeah.
like there's just so many things, and there's things I forgot about. Like until I went back and rewatched the Auburn game, I didn't realize that we didn't have Donovan Green or Max Wright for that game, and it's just it's remarkable what like that they were even to especially that they were able to come together at the end of that year and be a top 5 team in LSU. But yeah, I'm planning on doing either like a tweet thread. I may put this in an article or something, but um, I thought looking at the spring game and looking at some things that Bobby has done in the past, I feel like this run game is going to be a lot different scheme wise than it's been under Jimbo. Like just in terms of it seems like Petrino uses a little bit more creativity with like with more gap scheme and more leverage. Like he'll motion a tight end, have him block down and pull a guard or tackle around and like all that kind of stuff. And Jimbo would do a little bit of that here and there, but it was kind of inside zone right, inside zone left most of the time. But it just feels like with these backs, I bet Petrino is very happy with his group of backs, and I feel like I have to go back and look, but yeah, I feel like he's been more of a rotational kind of guy. Like you said, Coach Blackwell did that with a lot of success last year at Ole Miss. Going back to Jimbo's championship year at Florida State, they had 3 backs on that team that had 10 touchdowns that year. Like they rotated quite a bit. He hasn't done it here really, but maybe I think it would benefit to not have one guy get 250 carries in a season and have those guys rotate through quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of it at A&M, it's more than anything, it's just been a matter of you just seemingly always had one guy who was just way better than everybody else was. I mean,
Yeah,
I think the only season we really saw any kind of true committee was in 2021 when you had Spiller and A-Chain.
yeah,
And even then, like, people were still begging for A-Chain to get the ball more than he was.
right.
Um, but at the same time, it's like it was hard to be mad at Spiller's production either that season. But yeah, it's like more than anything, it's you talked about Petrino and his version of the run game, but just across the board, this has to be like the most offensive skill talent that Petrino's ever had at his disposal. I mean, yes, he had Lamar Jackson, so
Yeah,
that is not to be discounted
sure.
for obvious reasons. But I mean, save for Lamar, like A&M has way more talent on this team than he had on those teams at Louisville or even at Arkansas.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like I'm excited to see like he's done way more with way less.
yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I think Olin Buchanan had an article where there was a couple of receivers from that those Arkansas teams that like I think that there were maybe 2 or 3 receivers that went in the 4th round, and they had like okay careers. They kind of stuck around a little bit in the NFL, but the guys on this team, I mean, like these receivers on this team, I think it's got to be especially from 2020. Our best receiver was Anais, and he played running back half the time.
Right.
This group has really turned around, and it's one of the best rooms in the country. I'd say it's probably in the top 10. But Evan Stewart in year 2, Moose Muhammad with another year in a full-time role, and getting Anais Smith back, the spark plug of the offense. It's been a while since we've had this many receivers to be excited about on one team.
Absolutely. I would say it's easily the most receiver talent we've had since Jimbo came on board.
Yeah.
I think the only team I can think of that comes to mind is like that has that much when you just look at like the top 4 guys was maybe that 2016 team where because you had Christian Kirk, Josh Reynolds, Ricky Seals Jones, Speedy Noyle,
Yeah.
who he didn't quite end up being what we thought he was going to be.
Had talent.
Yeah, but I mean, I think this group is right up with that one, and this one's constructed very differently. They're very different players than any of those guys were. But I think it rivals that in talent. And of course, you also look back at 2012, where maybe from top to bottom there's not as much, but 2012 you had Ryan Swope and Mike Evans. That's a pretty potent 1-2 punch.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and Malcolm Kennedy, he had some nice moments that season too. But
true. But yeah, but looking at these guys for 2023, my biggest question is Anais Smith, because we've all kind of been talking as if he's going to come back, that he's fully healthy, that he's exactly the player he was before. And I don't know if that's the case. I'm not saying that because I know any kind of inside information or anything. I just know that that was a pretty serious leg injury that required surgery, that required a fair amount of rehab. I think that was a big part of why he came back, was because he knew he basically wasn't going to get to do any of that kind of pre-draft workouts if he tried to go to the draft this season.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of like when we see him on the field in September, is it the same Anais that we have seen, or is he just 85% of what he was?
Right. Well, and you've heard great things about Noah Thomas in the offseason.
Yeah.
That he could really be a breakout player on this team. And obviously you have the guys like Evan Stewart's not sitting on the bench, and I don't think Moose Muhammad is either. And I think there's going to be times where Petrino goes 2 tight ends. So it's going to be interesting to me how he uses Anais. Like if he wants to use him as kind of a chess piece to, kind of back to the way we did in 2020, where he's lined up in the backfield on some plays, he goes out wide. He does like those jet sweeps and things like that. But there's ways to get creative, and I feel like they'll probably do that. But it's a pretty good problem to have when you're thinking about, how can we get all these guys on the field at the same time? And they might do that. They might go 4 wide from time to time.
Yeah. Well, and yes, I do think there's going to be times over the season that we're all going to lament, why isn't so-and-so getting more catches? Why isn't so-and-so on the field more? But you hit on it. There's only so many receiver spots. And when you've got 4 players who you legit think all 4 are really, really elite receiver talents. There's only so many snaps, only so many passes to go around. So yeah, you're just relying on Petrino that he maximizes those guys. Not only to keep them happy or anything, but just to make the offense as effective as it could be. Because I mean, if nothing else, just for the Twitter discourse, I hope that we can put to bed the whole that receivers come to A&M to block narrative.
Yeah. They're good at it though. I'll say that.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with blocking wide receivers as long as you're also getting them the ball too.
Yeah, sure. No, I think I'm thinking about it. It's got to be the most receiver talent he's had at one time. But and there's a couple of these young guys that have a little bit different skill set than what we've got. Like Jordan Anthony, if Achane was still here, Jordan Anthony would be competing with him to be the fastest guy on the team. I think he ran like a 10.2 in high school. Transfer from Kentucky. Not a very big guy, listed at 5'9", 160. So pretty light frame. But you know, I don't know how much football he's played, but there's like that kind of speed you can't really teach that. And I wonder if they, he's pretty young, so but I wonder if they find a way to get him involved and just, hey, let's get him the ball and see what he can do with it.
Yeah, yeah. That I think very similar to Ernest Campbell, who's in A&M's 2024 class.
Yeah, big fan.
It's just guys that, like, you look at their speed and you're like, I don't care how tall they are, I don't care what their frame is. Like, when you're that fast, like, we'll figure out a use for you on this team.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
even if
Especially at
that
the
is
college
just
level.
yeah, even if that is just in the return game, or like, it's like certain packages, like, you can't have too much elite speed.
Yeah, and then
And
you got Jade Walker. I forget where
yeah,
he's from. I think a D2 or something like that, maybe.
I think what, like, Grand Canyon State or something, or Grand Valley State, something like that.
I think Grand Valley State sounds
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
But 6'4", 185, kind of that possession type receiver. But his highlights, he's got great ball skills.
yeah.
I've heard things here and there that he's starting to impress a little bit, but he wasn't here in the spring, so we'll get our first look at him this fall. But I like that they went and got more guys, because the depth after those first four was a couple of true freshmen, and they're good players, but you need more than 6 receivers going into the year.
Yeah, and Walker was another one that, I mean, like, same as you, like, just watching his highlights, I was like, this guy's, yeah, he can go up and get the ball.
Yeah.
He's not just like a lumbering guy by any means. I think I also heard somewhere, and I don't know if this is true, so if it's not, don't hold it against me. I heard somewhere that I think he grew like 2 inches since high school. And so that was part of the reason why he probably wasn't as highly recruited out of high school, because he was only difference in a 6'2" receiver and a 6'4" receiver is very different.
Yeah, big difference. And it's interesting. It like as far as the transfer portal goes, I feel like the JUCO players have made a little bit of a comeback, especially with that like with the COVID year and not being able to get film out there and things like that. Because our linebacker that we got from Jackson State, he went to JUCO for a couple of years and then went to like Middle Tennessee and then Jackson State. And now he's here. Like, he's kind of just made the rounds. But there's several different ways to attack the portal. And like there's guys that we didn't get that were D2 kind of guys, JUCO guys. I like that they went out and just kind of scoured the country and found guys that can come in and help them. So
yeah. Well, and that was something that, when A&M was going out and trying to get guys out of the portal this year, because after, we lost, I think 27 scholarship players to the portal, obviously we were going to have to bring in some other guys to plug those holes. But A&M was in a very unique position where you lost 27 players for the portal. Not a single one of them was a starter last year.
Yeah.
And so you're having to try to convince guys to come here. And normally, like, when you're convincing like other Power 5 players to come, they're saying like, oh, so I'm going to go there and start, right? But A&M was like, well, I don't know. We have actually already got this other guy who's pretty good, who is probably going to start, but no promises. So A&M was like, they needed a lot of bodies, but they really didn't need starters. So I think it was a much tougher sell than you would have thought it was, just knowing, like 27 guys left, because you needed to plug a lot of spots, but you needed depth, and recruiting the portal for depth is a lot harder if you're trying to recruit from other Power 5 programs, because no one wants to leave Virginia Tech when they're riding the bench just to come to A&M and also ride the bench. That's just generally not what guys do when they're looking to go to the portal. And so, so you touched on it. Like, I think going down to that, the G5 JUCO ranks, A&M was able to hopefully kind of mine some gold there, and get guys that they're either valuable depth or they hit, and then you struck gold and you get a guy who is a very productive player.
I thought it's a different world in college football today, and you got to keep up with the times. And I think that they did a really good job of adjusting there. But as far as the skill positions go, this is the best I've felt about quarterback in a long time. I think this is the best group of receivers that we've had in at least since 2016. I love these running backs. I love that whole room. Um, Lots of guys at tight end, and I feel like that. I feel like Donovan Green doesn't get the love that he should get. He didn't just tear it up last fall, but he got like probably 80-90% of the snaps last year. Had a really really solid year. Was looking great in the spring. Didn't get to see him in the spring game, but I'm not sure if he's broken out already. If you can consider that he has, but I think he's primed to have just a monster year this year.
Yeah, and it's hard because there are just so many other guys right there with him. Just from a recruiting pedigree standpoint, anyway, because you got Jake Johnson, who was the top tight end recruit in the country in that same class, and then you got Theo Orstrom from Sweden, who not as highly rated, but like you hear from all of the the guys on TexAgs and all the guys giving practice reports, and they just rave about this guy. Just that he's just this like tank who's just an athletic freak, and everyone kind of talks about that. Like when it clicks for him, when he finally
Yeah,
gets the mental side of the game to go with his physical traits, that this guy's just going to explode. Until you don't know when that's going to be.
yeah,
But yeah, I'm the same way. Like going back to just watching Donovan Green's like high school tape or in the high school all-star games, I always said, like, even once we knew we were getting Jake Johnson, I was like, I want to see Donovan Green because
yeah,
I just loved like his style of play. Um, I don't think he has the like elite athleticism of the other guys, but but yeah, we saw last year like he was very very productive, and I mean, at the end of the day, like you just need guys who, I mean, obviously you need talented guys. He's still exceptionally talented, but you need guys who like can block, can catch, and like know the offense, know where they're supposed to be, and make the right plays when they're supposed to. That's we talk so much about talent, but like it's as much about the mental part of the game as it is anything. And I think there's
yeah,
a reason. There's a reason like why he took over that starting role so quickly last year. It's because not only was he very talented, very physical, but I think it seemed like he knew that offense and was pretty much productive from day one.
yeah. And he wasn't a dominant blocker last year, but a very willing blocker, and that's really all you need. Like you don't need Gronkowski out there just mowing guys down, or Martellus Bennett. But he's willing to get in there and mix it up, and does quite well sometimes. I think he'll be asked to do some of that in this offense, but he should be a first down and a red zone machine in this offense. I think Connor's going to look for him a lot. But as far as Theodore Orstrom goes, probably top 3 athlete on the team, just in terms of his size and speed combination. And like you said, if he ever figures out the football stuff, he's going to be an incredible player. Hope that's this year. Or at least I hope it's sooner rather than later. But just insane upside with him.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, like I know I probably every time we get to this time of year, I always talk about how excited I am for the season to get here. But this year in particular, and in particular with this offense, I feel like it's the most excited I've been. And I say excited, I don't necessarily say optimistic. But just because I feel like we touched on it earlier, there's such a high level of variance with what
Yeah,
this team could be and what this offense could be. Because we saw what we think was the worst of it last year. But there's a lot of reasons that you think it could really vastly improve this year. So it's super exciting to see that first game out. Like, how different does it look? And I think we're going to find out very quickly whether or not this year is going to be markedly different from a year ago. Because as much as that first game, it's a cupcake opponent, it's easy to write it off and say, okay, like you're not really going to learn anything.
right.
But the bottom line is that, like, look, A&M did not score 40 points against anybody last year. So, like, if this team goes out and if they win like 52-10, I think you can already say like, okay, like that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Because so often, like you'll see like little problems that crop up in that game one versus a nobody, and you say, okay, well, it's game one, we'll work that stuff out. We're just working out the kinks, and then it's those same problems that you see persist the entire year.
Yeah.
So even though like you may not be playing some juggernaut right off the bat, like as soon as the season starts, you can start learning things about your team. So just excited that we're just over a month away from actually getting back to that, and after all this, like maybe the longest off season of my entire life, just because 5-7 left such a bad taste in everyone's mouth.
Oh yeah.
Kind of moving to like the next season, kind of definitively turning the page to okay, like this is not that anymore. This is something different.
Yeah. No, it's been a long off season. I listen to the Cover Three podcast and all sorts of other ones, but like we've just been an absolute punching bag.
Yeah,
For
of course.
everyone in college football media for the last year. And hey, that's fine. That's deserved. Last year was horrible and unacceptable in every way. And like we can't even list all the things that went wrong last year and led to those results. But I think 95% of them, I think have been. I, I don't want to sound definitive here, but I feel like a lot of those problems have been remedied.
Yeah.
I think the culture is going to be better. I think everyone was upset about the offense, rightfully so. I think they've taken the right steps to fix that. You know, fingers crossed that half the team doesn't get hurt in the first couple of games, or actually is able to participate in fall camp. Hopefully, our center doesn't have mono again. And just all those different things. It just sounds absurd to even sit here and talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. but yeah, it's just one of those where you're like just by like sheer odds, like
yeah,
it has to be better this year.
it's gonna come back to the mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Like all those things is not it's not normal. So like maybe this will be a quote unquote normal season, on all those fronts. But
yeah, you just hope. Yeah, it's like if you believe in like regression to the mean, if you believe in things like averaging out, is that we had such a down year this year. Like we're gonna have the up year to like balance things out.
Yeah, it's coming. And
so everyone says A&M's an 8-4 program. Well, last year we were 5-7, so I guess this year we got to go like 11-2.
Hey, it all evens out, right?
Got to make the math work out.
I would take that, but I know that people give us not me specifically, but at least my wife does sometimes, about being optimistic and Kool-Aid drinker, sunshine pumper thing. I feel like if I felt that a lot of those things hadn't been fixed and this was going to be a horrible year, I'd come on here and tell you that. I'd be like, hey, it's still Jimbo's offense. This is a lost cause, and not very optimistic about this year. But things like that, and all the others that we've talked about, that gives me hope. And just when I think I'm out, they pull me right back in.
Yeah. I feel like my biggest difference this year is, and maybe this is just like me kind of guarding my heart after what happened last year, but I'm going in like being hopeful, but with essentially zero expectations.
Right.
Because we've talked for the past hour and we've outlined a lot of reasons why things could improve, reasons why we think this team could be much better this year, especially on offense. That said, like we didn't see last year coming either. So we could be sitting here 2 months from now being like, all that stuff we talked about last year that was like part of the reason why this team struggled, half of that stuff still happening. This team's like just not going to be very good, and that sucks.
Yeah.
I don't think, I'm not predicting that, but like you have to acknowledge after last season, like that outcome is on the table. But this is the time of year for hope, and so we all hope that we see a rebound and we get to kind of have all those people who, as you mentioned, use A&M as a punching bag for the better part of the last year. Maybe don't eat their words, but they at least kind of are forced to stay quiet for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it is like it's kind of like a dopamine hit to listen to those podcasts after a big win that we have. Like just
Oh
to hear
yeah.
them say like, "Oh, this A&M team, man, they're playing so well and they're a good team." And like that first, if we go and just like blast Miami, I'm listening to every national show that following week just to hear
Oh yeah.
all the hype.
Yeah. You're sitting there like just fast forwarding through. It's like, all right. When are they getting to the A&M segment?
Yeah.
I tell you what, that Miami game. I know we're not doing like a season breakdown or anything. That Miami game does like that's the game that I'm the most nervous about, only because it's week 2, and
Yeah.
that does kind of set the
And it's
tone. I
there.
feel like, yeah, it kind of sets the tone for the season, because if you lose to them, then like the narrative is like, oh, like you just lost to a team that went 5-7 like last year, a team that you actually beat last year. So it doesn't bode well for what's going to happen the rest of the way. Versus if you win, you can kind of flip that thing on its head and say, oh, this was a team that everyone was saying, just like you, could be very improved this year. You beat them on the road. It's year 2 under Cristobal. It's like you can make the case if like that's kind of a notch in your belt of like a really solid win.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that one uh like like Auburn, I'm not too worried about. Arkansas, it's always going to be, a weird game, but I've got that Miami one circled because, like you said, it it should be an improved team. It's over there, and it's kind of a good benchmark of everything we've talked about. You go in there and put up a great performance. It's going to feed the hype machine even more, and rightfully so. Like we'll get on here and talk about the good and the bad, but definitely one to have circled on your calendars. But
Yeah, and I think it'll be one of those where I'm not even so concerned about like blowing Miami out. Um, but I want to win, and I want to look good while we do it.
yeah,
Because last year we won, and we were all like so relieved that we won because we had just lost to App State the week before. But I mean, even the most fervent A&M fan looked at that game and said, like, "Well, I'm glad we won, but ugh, that was still like a slog of a game." It's
yeah,
no one was like just blown away saying everything's fixed.
yeah. I think we blocked like 2 or 3 kicks in that game, and like it was a very weird game because like they had way more yards than we did, but just yeah, it wasn't one you felt like, oh yeah, like this is gonna be fine. It was still like,
Yeah.
we won, but don't know
I
if
mean,
we're gonna
kind of the
win much more.
same thing as Arkansas the next week. Because you're like, well, we won, but we needed that weird fumble return for a touchdown. Then we needed oink doink off the
Yeah,
top of the goalpost. So it's
yeah,
like we'll take the W, but still some work to do.
yeah,
So just hopefully this year we can go through September and like actually have like tangible things of like this team is playing well in addition to winning games,
yeah,
and really get that hype train moving.
yeah,
Because and one other thing, like just as far as that early season slate, I want the Alabama game to live up to the hype for once, and by that I don't mean the game itself, because the past 2 years have been fantastic games. But the past 2 years, like we've sat here in July and
oh
everyone's
yeah,
talked about like what a great matchup is going to be. And then both seasons, like we flubbed the dub enough, in the opening month that by the time the game rolled around, Alabama's 20-point favorites and no one cares about the game anymore. It'd be really
it,
great to like have both teams go in undefeated or at most one loss, and
yeah.
that game like gets a lot of that kind of big build up, like that whole week leading into that game.
I feel like I've been saying for 20 off seasons in a row, like, oh, if you can just get to that Bama game undefeated,
Yeah, yeah.
it's this like, and the schedule's been the same kind of setup every
This
year.
is
It's
the
been the
year.
same. Yeah, this is it. Hey, 2024, we don't play Alabama, so
Or
it'll be a
Georgia.
whole,
So
it'll be a whole new narrative.
that's a brave new world, man.
uh, crazy sport that we love and follow. But appreciate you coming on, Robert. I'm sure we'll have you back on sometime before the season starts. But keep doing great work and fighting the good fight on Twitter. Go go check out his stuff at Good Bull Hunting on Twitter at RCBO5. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week. I think we're doing backers and DBs next week, but we'll talk to y'all then. Thank y'all so much.